Welcome to the Life of a Marketer podcast again. And today's guest is Jeff Lerner. Jeff is over in the California area. And welcome to the show, Jeff. I'm going to just allow you to introduce yourself and tell us about yourself and tell us about your company and what you do.
Thanks, Jared. I've been in marketing for 20 plus years. I worked at Google back in the early days when Google was kind of still a startup in a lot of ways, before Gmail existed, before YouTube became part of the platform, and kind of back when Google was just a basic search engine. From there, I've got to spend some time running a marketing agency, learning how agencies best engage and interact with their clients. And then I wanted to go corporate side and really focus on taking organizations and products to market. And so I worked at Cricket Wireless for a while through the acquisition by AT&T. I've worked at some other companies, both in New York on the East Coast, as well as here in San Diego. And for the last about 3 years, I have been a fractional CMO. So I started my own business called Misnomer. So it's misnomer.co. And I serve as a fractional CMO for a lot of startups and small businesses that are really kind of looking to go to market with new products, new services that, as I put it, hopefully will change the world.
So tell me why the name Misnomer? What is that all about?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I get that question a lot. A misnomer is to have like the wrong name, and so I've dealt with just so many founders and other individuals running organizations, and their companies or their products just have odd names to them. And, I'll ask them like, hey, how'd you come up with this? And usually they have a great answer, which is, oh, it's a, combination of this word and this word. And I really wanted to showcase this and bring it together. And it all may work for the founder who came up with it, but to anyone outside of that person, it's a misnomer. It's the wrong name. It's something that creates confusion. And so I kind of jokingly named my company that, as if to say, as a marketing agency, it would be a misnomer to almost name your company Misnomer.
Yeah, that's very common that people try to get cute and then it's not clear exactly what it is they have.
Exactly.
I love that name. That's a good name. All right. So what's the best thing for you about being in the marketing industry?
Yeah, I think for me, the best thing about being in the marketing industry is understanding or spending my time focused on the psychology of users, of consumers. I may be one of the few people who watches and enjoys TV commercials because I want to see how brands are trying to engage with their desired audience, their targets. And so being in marketing it's essentially it's mind games, right? Like, it's how do I convince you to either buy my product or service when I know you're in the consideration for it, right? Like, if you're looking to buy a car, how do I convince you to buy my brand of car? Or on the flip side, it's how do I convince you that you need something that you've never even thought about before? I look around my house, my office, and there are products here that I'm like, I never proactively was like, wow, I really need that. But I have it because at some point, a marketing agency, marketer put together an ad and, targeted me in some way. And I said, you know what? I never thought about that, but I'm going to buy it. So it's psychology. It's playing with, the mindset and the emotions of people to get them to take your desired behavior. And for me, that's both extremely complicated and difficult, but also a lot of fun to do.
I agree. I agree. I like looking at ads as well. And as you get into marketing more and more in the years past, you realize 9 times out of 10 how bad a lot of the marketing is out there. It's amazing.
Yep,
And even sometimes what people think of as memorable is maybe it's not that good as far as marketing goes. So I agree
exactly.
definitely. Yeah, my wife gets tired of me like, oh, that's a terrible commercial when I'm
Yeah,
watching commercials. She gets,
same,
what do you
same.
care? Yeah,
Yeah. I mean,
I
the
agree.
number of times I've seen a commercial and just sat there being like, why? Like, why? If you had money to buy the ad space, why on earth did you, what I imagine would be like go cheap in how you produce this ad because it makes no sense or it doesn't target the right audience? Like, do they have any idea who their ICP is? Because what they produced and what just aired is a complete waste of budget.
Exactly, exactly. And this is a problem that a lot of medium and startups and smaller businesses have as well. They have the same problems, except they just don't spend, millions on it. Um,
It's true. And look, and this is what I tell startups that I work with is before you spend a dime, before you spend a dime on any sort of marketing, whether even if it's just some paid ads somewhere or anything, small scale, make sure you've done what I call the foundational marketing. Make sure you know your mission, your vision, your values. You have a really clean and clear understanding of not just your company, but your competitive set. How are you differentiated? What makes your product or service unique? Like there's a whole checklist that I go through with my clients to say, don't spend any money until you perfectly align on all of these things. Because if you do, you're wasting that money because you, as an organization, collectively have not agreed on these things. How can you expect your customers to agree on those?
awesome, awesome. I agree totally. I agree. So, what sort of advice do you offer to those that are in the marketing industry right now?
I think to anybody who's in marketing, the piece of advice I give to them is hold the people you work with accountable to understand that what they are, what is essentially the audience of one, right? Like as marketers, the biggest piece of pushback and friction we often get is when someone says, but I like this, or no, I don't like this. The number of emails and Slack messages I have from a founder who's like, I don't like this color palette you put together for our brand, or I really wish our, font was Comic Sans, or, and I'm like, why? And the answer is always because I like it or because of, some reason that's personal to them. And so what I always tell other marketers is that's your biggest and most important opportunity to push back and say, kind of, your opinion doesn't matter. The opinions that matter are your customers, the consumers. They have to resonate with your brand and vice versa. It's not about the founder or the CEO getting the color palette and font that they want. It's about the users having the experience that they want in order to become paying customers. So any marketer out there who's getting that pushback, this is when we dig in our heels, stand firm and say, I make decisions as a marketer based on user data, based on research and feedback, not by one-off personal opinion.
So, in those moments, what have you found as a marketer? What is the best way to have that conversation without being too coming across as too aggressive? It's something I always find challenging.
Yeah, I mean, so as a native New Yorker, I tend to just be extremely direct and say, maybe not your opinion doesn't matter, but I'm very clear in saying, look, we could build it and do exactly what you're asking me. And you will go home feeling good about the way your brand or website or whatever it is looks in your eyes. But you won't see the revenue, the growth. You won't see the financial wins that you want. You'll just be able to see the aesthetic wins. Or put some trust in me, in what I do, in marketing, the users that you hope to attract. And not only will we create something that you do find aesthetically good looking, but we're going to put together something that, while may not be what you necessarily wanted, it will drive the performance that you want. And so I kind of give that option, right? Like instead of just saying, no, I'm not going to do it, it's just I can, but you're not going to get the results that you were hoping for. Let me do it a slightly different way.
Yeah, that one's always a challenge, at least for me. Is to try not to be, not to say that's the worst idea I've ever heard in my life. To
Yeah.
try
Trust
to
me, we've all thought that over and over and over again.
massage them a little bit, say,
Yep.
well, maybe we need to think about this a little bit.
Yeah.
It's a challenge. It's a challenge. Yeah, so presenting two different options, okay, we'll do it your way, but here's the data, and this is what it told us. I think.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's the thing about being a data-driven marketer is it makes it really hard for people to argue with you. If you can present something and say, "Hey, look, if I change our landing page from a white background to a, dark mode background and it, conversion rates increase by 3%." Someone can sit there all day long and make the argument that it's a bad idea, that it doesn't look as nice, that nobody uses dark mode or whatever. But if the data says, well, no, in fact, our conversion rates increased 3%, like it's really hard to argue with that and say and still make the argument that it's not a good decision to have gone in that direction. So use data, make decisions, have far fewer arguments.
Right. Right. Well, thanks for sharing all that. That's a very valuable piece of information for us.
Sure.
We're going to switch gears a little bit as this podcast, it's a brief podcast, and so we keep moving pretty quick. So what are some other successful people that are in marketing like yourself would you like to acknowledge that you think should be on the podcast?
Yeah, so there's a friend of mine who I met, in a job, a few years ago. His name is Nick Musica, and Nick is, genius SEO guy, but not just genius SEO guy. Like, has a really good head on his shoulders about marketing, about attribution, about really just understanding, some of the broader landscapes, while also being kind of technical genius when it comes to SEO. And so anytime a client of mine is looking for SEO work, he's my go-to. Just a fantastic individual who does exceptional work for my clients and, always has a great story to tell as well. So he would be a really good guest to have on this podcast.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. I appreciate that. And for our final question, just for fun, tell me the oldest technology you remember using.
Yeah, it's such a very interesting question. I can't remember if it necessarily was the first, but I do remember when my family first got a microwave and I was young. I'm a kid of the early 80s. And the funny part of it was I knew that it was, you could cook food faster or heat up something, but it was also new technology to kind of the grown-ups as well. And I do remember when I was, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5, something like that, my little cousins were over at the house and one of my cousins like stepped in a puddle or something and her socks were wet. And my uncle thought, hey, you know what? I could just put the socks in the microwave and they'll dry. And well, let's you can't. So we learned very quickly you cannot put wet socks in the microwave and hope that they dry. Um, so I remember like this a big, I mean, this was like, these first microwaves, they were huge in terms of, size compared to what they can be today. But this huge appliance like in the corner of the countertop in our kitchen, and just like seeing all the adults scrambling to try to like shut this thing off, realizing that the wet socks in the microwave were a very bad idea.
So what happened? I've never seen someone do that before. Like what did it like set it on fire or what?
So I can't remember if it was fire or something. I mean, obviously it probably wasn't like sparks because that I don't know. All I remember was hearing all of the grown-ups like screaming and yelling and like sprinting into the kitchen and then like opening up the microwave and like trying to get out these socks and like yelling at the kids to get out of the kitchen. So all I know is something tragic happened in that microwave. I'm pretty sure the socks were not salvageable and ended up in the trash, but
That's
so I don't know what they did. but all I remember was that was, lesson number one, don't put your wet socks in the microwave.
If there's anything we learned on this podcast, don't put
That's
wet
it.
in the microwave. There you go.
Yep.
Good advice from the 80s.
There you go.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, Jeff, it's been a pleasure to have you on the podcast today. Thanks for sharing everything that you did. It was short, but we got some really good information from you. Everybody, you can catch the Life of a Marketer podcast Tuesdays and Thursdays at 11 something. You can catch us. We stream it online on different social media platforms. We also have a YouTube channel, the Life of a Marketer podcast at the Life of a Marketer podcast. If you can subscribe to it and you'll see our episodes as they come out. You can also get on our email list. If you will just email me, jared@tiveleadmarketing.com. I will add you to our email list, and each time that we release the episode, as soon as we release it streaming and on YouTube, we send out an email at the same time. Once again, Jeff, thanks so much for being on. This has been an awesome podcast.
Thanks so much. A lot of fun.